The mining vessel Precious Echo drifted through the asteroid field like a wounded animal, its hull by plasma burns and micrometeorite impacts. Captain clutched the command console with his four-fingered hands, watching helplessly as another section of their ship vented atmosphere into the void. The emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the bridge, where his crew worked frantically at damaged stations. "Status report," demanded, his voice carrying the authority that had kept his crew alive for the past 18 hours since the attack began. Chief Engineer Eth looked up from her diagnostics panel, her large, compound eyes reflecting the red warning lights. "Hull breaches in sections 7 through 12. Life support is down to 60% capacity. We've lost primary engines and half our defensive shields." She paused, mandibles clicking nervously. "Captain, at this rate, we have maybe 6 hours before complete system failure." They were not a warrior species. Their entire civilization had been built on peaceful mining operations and trade negotiations. They possessed advanced technology for extracting rare minerals from hostile environments, but their ships were built for efficiency, not combat. When the hunting fleet had ambushed them 3 systems away, they had been completely unprepared. Communications Officer A's antennae twitched as she monitored the long-range sensors. "Captain, the fleet is maintaining position at the system's edge. They're not pursuing, but they're not leaving either." Understood the Predator's strategy. They were notorious throughout this sector for their brutal efficiency. They would wait for their prey to die slowly, then move in to claim the valuable cargo and salvage. It was a psychological warfare tactic that had served them well across dozens of systems. "Any response to our distress signals?" asked, though he already knew the answer. A's antennae drooped. "Nothing, sir. We've been broadcasting on all frequencies for 18 hours. The Galactic Council ships are too far away, and the local defense forces—" She didn't need to finish. Everyone knew the local forces were either destroyed or had fled when they arrived. Navigator spoke up from his station, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sir, I've calculated our options. We could attempt to reach the third planet's moon, but our engines won't last that long. We could try to hide in the asteroid field, but the sensors will eventually find us." The bridge fell silent except for the ominous humming of failing systems. Looked around at his crew of 12, each representing different species from the Galactic Mining Consortium. They had families, dreams, entire lives waiting for them back home. The cargo hold contained enough rare Earth elements to fund a small colony, but none of that mattered now. "Keep broadcasting the distress signal," ordered finally. "All frequencies, maximum power." "Sir, that will drain our remaining power reserves faster," Chief Engineer Eth warned. "Then we'll die with dignity, reaching for help rather than cowering in silence." As if summoned by his words, the long-range sensors detected movement. A's eyes widened as she studied the readings. "Captain, I'm detecting massive hyperspace distortions at the edge of the system. Something big is coming through." On the main, space itself seemed to tear apart as ships emerged from faster-than-light travel. But these weren't the sleek, organic curves of Galactic Council vessels or the brutal, spiked designs of ships. These vessels were different entirely. The lead ship was enormous, easily 3 times the size of a standard Council dreadnought. Its hull was a dark gray metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange angular protrusions covered its surface like geometric tumors, and bright blue lights traced patterns across its armor plating. Behind it came more ships, dozens of them, each unique in design but sharing the same aggressive, utilitarian aesthetic. "What are those?" Navigator whispered. A worked frantically at her station, trying to identify the newcomers. "I'm not getting any matches in our database. These ship designs are completely unknown." "Wait," she paused, checking her readings twice. "Captain, these ships are massive. That lead vessel reads as over 4 kilometers long, and the energy signatures, they're off the charts." The unknown fleet moved with a precision that spoke of advanced coordination systems. They arranged themselves in a formation that was both beautiful and terrifying, like a weapon designed by artists. The hunting fleet, which had seemed so menacing just moments before, suddenly appeared small and insignificant. A new voice crackled through the communication system, speaking in accented galactic standard. "This is Admiral Sarah of the Terran Defense Force, commanding the 3rd Fleet. We received your distress signal. Please identify yourselves and your situation." His hands trembled as he activated the communications array. "This is Captain of the mining vessel Precious Echo. We are under attack by raiders. Our ship is heavily damaged, and we have wounded aboard." There was a brief pause before the alien voice responded. "Roger that, precious Echo. We have visual on hostile vessels at grid reference 77 Alpha. Are those your attackers?" "Yes, Admiral. They've been holding position, waiting for us to die." Another pause, then a different quality entered the alien's voice, something cold and dangerous. "Understood, Captain. Please maintain your current position. We'll handle this." The unknown ships began to move with a fluid grace that their massive size. The lead vessel turned toward the fleet and noticed weapon ports opening along its hull like the eyes of some sleeping giant awakening. Chief Engineer Eth was studying the sensor readings with growing amazement. "Captain, these ships, their technology is incredible. The power output from their engines alone is beyond anything in our databases, and those weapon systems," she trailed off, shaking her head in disbelief. They watched as the alien fleet approached the position. The Predator ships, which had seemed so menacing, now appeared to be reconsidering their situation. Several began powering up their engines, clearly preparing to flee. "This is Admiral to vessels," the alien voice came through the comm system again. "You will immediately cease all hostile actions and withdraw from this system. This is your only warning." The response was swift and predictable. Their ships opened fire with everything they had, plasma cannons and missile batteries, unleashing a devastating barrage at the unknown fleet. The space between the two forces lit up with weapons fire. What happened next? Everything the crew thought they knew about space combat. The alien ship's defensive systems activated with blinding efficiency. Point defense lasers intercepted missiles with mathematical precision, while energy shields deflected plasma bolts like raindrops. Not a single shot from the barrage reached its target. Then the aliens returned fire. The lead ship's main guns spoke once, a single salvo that crossed the distance between fleets in less than a second. The flagship simply ceased to exist, vaporized so completely that there wasn't even debris left behind. "Impossible," whispered Navigator. "No weapon has that kind of power." The remaining ships attempted to scatter, but the alien fleet was ready for them. Smaller vessels that had been hidden in the formation's rear suddenly burst forward with impossible acceleration, moving like fighters despite being the size of cruisers. They engaged the fleeing pirates with ruthless efficiency. The battle, if it could even be called that, lasted less than 10 minutes. When the weapons' fire finally ceased, nothing remained of the hunting fleet except expanding clouds of superheated gas. Admiral's voice returned to the communication channel. "Precious Echo, this is Admiral. The hostile forces have been neutralized. We're dispatching medical and engineering teams to assist with your repairs. Please prepare to receive boarders." Found his voice with difficulty. "Admiral who? What are you? We've never encountered your species before." "We're humans, Captain, from a world called Earth, and it seems we have a lot to talk about." As the massive alien ship approached their position, couldn't help but wonder what kind of species could build such vessels and wield such devastating power. The name, human, meant nothing to him, but clearly these beings were unlike anything the galaxy had ever encountered. A smaller craft detached from the alien flagship, moving toward their damaged vessel. Through the viewports, could see figures in what appeared to be powered armor, their movements efficient and professional. "Receiving docking request from the human vessel," reported A. "They're asking permission to come aboard." Looked around his bridge one more time, at his crew who had been certain they would die in this lonely asteroid field. Whatever these humans were, they had saved their lives when no one else would come. "Grant them permission," he said, "and prepare to meet our rescuers." They had always believed the galaxy was divided between predators and prey, with peaceful species like themselves surviving only by avoiding the attention of more violent races. But as he watched the human ships maintaining protective formation around his wounded vessel, began to suspect that the galaxy's power balance was about to change dramatically. Unknown to him, this first contact between humans and the broader galactic community would indeed reshape everything. The rescue of a single mining vessel would become the opening move in a transformation that would echo across countless star systems. But for now, Captain simply waited to meet the beings who had emerged from the void like avenging angels, wielding weapons of impossible power and extending mercy to strangers. The humans were coming aboard, and with them, A new chapter in galactic history was about to begin. The airlock hissed open with a sound that seemed to carry the weight of history. Captain stood with his senior officers in the cargo bay, watching as the first humans stepped aboard their ship. What emerged every expectation he might have had about their rescuers. The lead figure was tall by galactic standards, nearly 2 meters in height, wearing form-fitting armor that seemed to blend advanced technology with practical design. The helmet retracted with a mechanical whisper, revealing features that were simultaneously alien and strangely familiar. The human had pale skin, dark hair pulled back in a functional style, and eyes that held an intelligence tempered by something recognized as combat experience. Captain of the human's voice was clear and measured, speaking galactic standard with only a slight accent. "I'm Commander, head of the relief team. We're here to help." Behind her came more humans, each carrying equipment that hummed with sophisticated technology. Some moved toward the damaged sections of the ship, while others approached the crew with what appeared to be medical scanners. Commander managed, still processing the reality of the situation. "We cannot express our gratitude. You saved our lives when no one else would come." Something flickered across the human's features, an expression couldn't quite identify. "We received your distress call. Where we come from, you don't ignore people calling for help." She gestured toward her team. "Doctor will examine your injured crew members while Lieutenant Torres assesses your ship's damage. Is that acceptable?" The casual competence with which the humans moved was remarkable. They didn't seem awed by alien technology or nervous about first contact. Instead, they worked with the focused efficiency of professionals handling a routine emergency. Doctor, a shorter human with gentle eyes and steady hands, approached Chief Engineer Eth, who had suffered plasma burns during the attack. "May I?" she asked, holding up a device that resembled nothing in the medical database. Eth looked to her captain, who nodded. As the human doctor began her examination, the device emitted a soft blue light that seemed to analyze the engineer's injuries at the molecular level. "Interesting," Doctor murmured. "Your physiology is carbon-based with a copper hemoglobin variant. The plasma burns have damaged the tissue, but nothing we can't treat." She looked up at Eth with a reassuring smile. "You'll be fine. This might feel strange, but it won't hurt." The healing device worked with impossible efficiency, cellular regeneration occurring at a rate that made the medical officer gasp in amazement. Within minutes, Eth's injuries were completely healed, leaving not even scars behind. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Torres was examining the hull breaches with equipment that seemed to understand the ship's systems better than its own diagnostic computers. "These are clean repairs," he announced. "Whoever built this vessel knew their engineering. We can patch the hull breaches and restore your life support to full capacity within the hour." Commander noticed's expression of wonder. "Captain, I know this must be overwhelming. Perhaps we could speak privately. I have some questions about what happened here." They moved to a small cabin adjacent to the bridge. The human commander's presence filled the space with quiet authority and found himself responding to her natural leadership despite having no idea what species she represented. "Commander, before we discuss anything else, I must ask, what are humans? We've never encountered your species, and our databases contain no records of Earth or the Terran Defense Force." Settled into a chair that was slightly too small for her frame, her movements precise and economical. "We're relatively new to this region of the galaxy. Earth is about 800 light-years from here, in what you probably consider unexplored space." She paused, studying his reaction. "We've been aware of the galactic community for some time, but this is our first direct intervention." "Aware of us for how long?" "About 50 years. We've been monitoring communications, studying your languages and cultures, learning about the various species and their relationships." The expression grew serious. "What we've observed has been concerning." Felt his mandibles tighten involuntarily. "Concerning how?" "The attack on your vessel, for instance. From our monitoring, this appears to be a common occurrence. Peaceful species being preyed upon by aggressive ones, with little effective protection from authorities." The human leaned forward slightly. "Captain, how many times has your species been attacked by pirates in the last standard year?" The question struck uncomfortably close to home. The Galactic Council provides what protection it can, but space is vast and patrol ships are limited. "That's not what I asked." Found himself answering despite his diplomatic training. 17 recorded attacks on vessels in the past year. 3 ships were lost with all hands. and how many of those attacks resulted in the pirates being captured or punished. The silence stretched between them, finally admitted none. Commander nodded grimly. That's what our intelligence suggested. The current galactic order seems to operate on a predator-prey dynamic, with species like yours existing at the mercy of more aggressive races. The galaxy has always been this way, said, though the words felt hollow even as he spoke them. It is the natural order. The strong survive and the peaceful adapt. Natural order? Something dangerous entered the human's voice. Captain, where I come from, we have a different perspective on what's natural. Before could respond, the ship's communication system activated. Captain, came A's voice, we're receiving a message from Admiral. She's requesting permission to speak with you directly. Commander stood. With your permission, Captain, I think it's time you heard from my commanding officer. They returned to the bridge, where the main now displayed the image of another human. Admiral Sarah appeared to be in her 50s, with graying hair and eyes that held the kind of authority that came from years of command. Behind her, the bridge of her massive ship hummed with activity as crew members worked at stations displaying technology that seemed decades ahead of anything in the Galactic Council's arsenal. Captain, Admiral said, I hope my people are taking good care of you. Admiral, your crew has been remarkable, but I confess, I'm struggling to understand who you are and how you came to be here. His expression softened slightly. I understand your confusion. We've been watching this region of space for some time, monitoring communications and observing the various species and their interactions. When we detected your distress call, we knew we had to act. But why? We are strangers to you. Why risk your ships and crews for people you've never met? The Admiral was quiet for a moment, as if considering how to explain something fundamental about her species. Captain, humans have a saying, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. We heard your call for help, and we had the power to respond. That made it our responsibility. Even against unknown enemies in unfamiliar space. Especially then, his voice carried absolute conviction. We've been observing them for months. They're a plague on peaceful commerce in this sector, and they've grown bold because no one has ever made them pay for their crimes. Chief Engineer Eth, her injuries now completely healed, spoke up hesitantly. Admiral, your weapons? We've never seen anything like them. The power required to destroy a flagship with a single shot. Our technology is different, acknowledged. We've followed a different path of development than most galactic species, but technology isn't what matters here. Then what does? Asked. Choice. Every day, every species in this galaxy makes choices about what kind of civilization they want to build. Most have chosen to accept that predators will prey on the weak, that peaceful beings must hide or submit to survive. The Admiral leaned forward in her command chair. We've chosen differently. Navigator, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke. What happens now, Admiral? There were just one hunting pack. There are hundreds of pirate fleets in this region alone. Now, Admiral said with something that might have been a smile, we begin to change things. The shifted to show the space around the asteroid field. In addition to the human fleet, new contacts were appearing on sensors. Ships were emerging from hyperspace throughout the system, dozens of them representing multiple species. Admiral, a reported, her voice filled with confusion, I'm detecting Galactic Council transponders. It's a full task force led by the dreadnought Harmony of Spheres. Admiral's expression didn't change. Yes, we contacted the Council after neutralizing it seems they're very interested in meeting us. The Council felt his heart's racing. Admiral, the Galactic Council has strict protocols about unauthorized military action. They may view your attack on thee as an act of aggression. Let them, replied calmly. It's time the galaxy met humanity properly. On the tactical display, the Council fleet was arranging itself in what was clearly a confrontational formation. The human ships responded by adjusting their own positions with fluid precision, neither backing down nor taking an aggressive stance. Commander, still standing beside, spoke quietly. Captain, you might want to secure your crew. When diplomats and admirals start talking, things can get complicated quickly. As if summoned by her words, a new communication request came through the system. The identifier showed it as coming from Council Admiral, Supreme Commander of the local defense forces. Admiral looked at through the, Captain, would you mind if we took this call together? You were the victim here after all. Your perspective might be valuable. Realized he was about to witness something unprecedented in galactic history. First contact between humanity and the established galactic order. And somehow, he and his small mining crew were going to be at the center of it all. "Accepted, Admiral," he said, not entirely sure what he was agreeing to. The split to accommodate a new image. Admiral appeared, his reptilian features set in an expression of barely controlled anger. Behind him, the bridge of his dreadnought displayed the ordered efficiency of Council military doctrine. "Unknown vessels," began without preamble, "you have committed acts of aggression against sovereign ships in Council-protected space. Identify yourselves and prepare to explain your actions." Admiral's response was delivered with perfect diplomatic courtesy and absolute steel underneath. "I am Admiral Sarah, commanding the 3rd Fleet of the Terran Defense Force. We responded to a distress call and neutralized hostile forces threatening innocent civilians." Terran's eyes narrowed. "That designation appears in no Council records. You are operating without authorization in violation of galactic law." "Whose law?" asked quietly. The question hung in the air like a challenge, and realized he was watching the moment when everything would begin to change. The tension in the star system was palpable, crackling across communication channels like static electricity before a storm. Admiral's reptilian features hardened as he processed Admiral's question, his scaled hands gripping his command console with barely restrained anger. "Galactic law," replied, his voice carrying the authority of an established order, "enacted by the Council of Unified Worlds and enforced throughout civilized space. No species may deploy military forces without proper authorization and registration." Admiral's expression remained perfectly calm, but Captain, standing beside Commander on his own bridge, could sense the dangerous undercurrent in her response. "Admiral, are you suggesting we should have allowed to murder innocent civilians while we waited for proper paperwork? The Council has established procedures for dealing with piracy. Local defense forces were nowhere to be found," interrupted smoothly. "We monitored all channels. No Council ships responded to the Precious Echo's distress call. In fact, our records show 17 similar attacks in this sector over the past year, with 0 effective response from your local defense forces." His tongue flicked out briefly, a sign of agitation among his species. "The Council cannot be everywhere at once. Resources are limited and so peaceful species die while pirates grow bold," finished. "Admiral, with respect, your system has failed these people." The accusation hit like a physical blow. Around the galaxy, species had always accepted the Council's limitations as natural law. Resources were finite, space was vast, and some losses were inevitable. No one had ever before suggested that the fundamental structure of galactic civilization might be inadequate. Captain watched the exchange with growing amazement. His entire worldview was being challenged in real time. They had always accepted their vulnerability as the price of being a peaceful species. They built fast ships to run from predators, paid tribute when necessary, and accepted losses as inevitable. But here were beings who had looked at that same universe and decided it was unacceptable. "Admiral," came a new voice as another section of the activated. Council diplomat Aura appeared, her crystalline features reflecting the bridge lights in complex patterns. "I am First Speaker Aura. Perhaps we should approach this situation with less confrontational rhetoric." Nodded respectfully toward the diplomat. "First Speaker, I apologize if our rescue operation has created diplomatic complications. That was not our intention. Nevertheless, you have entered Council space without permission and engaged in military action without authorization. These are serious violations that cannot be overlooked simply because your intentions were benevolent." Commander stepped forward slightly and noticed the movement had been precisely calculated to place her within this frame. "First Speaker, with respect, whose space is this really?" The question caught Aura off guard. "This system falls under Council jurisdiction." "According to whom?" pressed. "Captain, does the consortium pay taxes to the Council?" Found himself speaking before he had fully considered the implications. "No, we are an independent commercial entity." "Do you vote in Council elections? Do your people have representation in the government that claims authority over your fate?" "Well, no, but—" "Then by what right does the Council claim sovereignty over you?" Turned back to the diplomats. You want to claim authority over independent peoples while accepting no responsibility for their protection. The silence that followed was deafening. Around the galaxy, countless species existed in exactly this liminal space, not members of the Council but subject to its authority, entitled to its protection in theory but abandoned to their fate in practice. Admiral's voice cracked like a whip when he finally responded. Unknown species or not, you have demonstrated capabilities that pose a potential threat to galactic security. I am ordering you to submit to inspection and registration procedures immediately. No. The simple word carried such finality that even the background noise of working bridge crews seemed to fade. Admiral delivered it without heat or anger, just absolute certainty. Admiral continued, his tone becoming threatening. You are outnumbered 3-1. Do not force us to take action against you. Admiral replied, and now her voice carried an edge of steel that made skin crawl with primitive warning signals. You are welcome to try. The tactical display on's bridge showed the positions of both fleets. The Council ships had indeed achieved numerical superiority, their formation classic and textbook perfect. But there was something about the human formation that easy analysis. Their ships moved with a fluid coordination that suggested either incredible training or some form of technological integration beyond anything in the galactic database. This is madness, snapped. You cannot seriously be threatening military action against the lawful authority of the Galactic Council. I'm not threatening anything, responded calmly. I'm simply informing you that my fleet will not submit to inspection by a government that claims authority it has never earned over people it has consistently failed to protect. First Speaker Ara attempted to restore diplomatic calm. Surely we can find a peaceful resolution to this situation. Admiral, what would humanity require to register with the Council and accept our authority? Nothing you can offer, replied immediately. We've spent 50 years studying your civilization, First Speaker. We've watched how it operates, how it treats its members, how it abandons non-members to their fate. We've seen the results of your galactic order. And what results are those? Ara asked, though something in her crystalline voice suggested she already knew the answer. Endless predation of the weak by the strong, entire species living in fear, technology and resources hoarded by the powerful while those who need protection are told that resources are too limited to help them. His voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. You've created a galaxy where might makes right, then wondered why pirates flourish. Captain felt something shifting inside his own mind as he listened. These accusations weren't abstract political theories. They described his own life experience with uncomfortable accuracy. How many times had his people petitioned for protection? How many times had they been told that Council resources were stretched too thin, that they should invest in better defensive systems, that some risk was simply the price of operating in space? What alternative do you propose? Demanded. Chaos, every species building its own military and fighting for dominance. No, Admiral replied, justice. The word hung in the space between fleets like a gauntlet thrown down in challenge. Realized he had never heard anyone speak of justice as something that could be actively pursued rather than simply hoped for. Elaborate, Ara requested, her diplomatic training overriding what was probably considerable personal offense. Simple, predators should fear consequences. Pirates should know that attacking innocent civilians will bring overwhelming retaliation. The weak should be protected not because they pay taxes or vote correctly, but because they deserve to live in peace. A beautiful sentiment, said coldly, but impractical on a galactic scale. You cannot police entire regions of space based on abstract idealism. Can't we? Asked. Admiral, what was your response time to Captain's distress call? That's irrelevant. Our ships were engaged in other operations. 18 hours, continued as if he hadn't spoken. An entire day passed while these people waited to die. Do you know what our response time was? Didn't answer. 16 minutes from receiving the distress call to emerging from hyperspace. We crossed 400 light years in 16 minutes because people needed help. Chief Engineer Eth, listening from her station, whispered to her captain, That's impossible. No ship can calculate hyperspace coordinates that quickly, let alone make such a precise jump. But Lieutenant Torres, the human engineer still working on their repairs, overheard her. Ma'am, if I may, that's only impossible if you're thinking about it wrong. How so? You're thinking about responding to individual distress calls. We don't do that. Tors gestured toward the human fleet visible through the viewports. We maintain a continuous watch. Every inhabited system in a 1,000-light-year radius is monitored constantly. We know where every ship is, where every threat develops, where help is needed before the victims even know they need it. The implications hit like a physical blow. You're watching everything. Not watching like spying, Tors clarified quickly. Watching like a lifeguard watches swimmers. We monitor communication traffic for distress signals, track known pirate movements, identify developing threats. When someone needs help, we're already moving before they finish transmitting their location. Admiral's voice cut across their conversation. Admiral, I'm going to make you an offer, a demonstration, if you will. What kind of demonstration? You claim the Council protects this region of space. I claim your protection is inadequate. Let's test both assertions. His image shifted as she gestured to something off-screen. I'm transmitting the locations of 14 active pirate bases within 50 light-years of this position. Your intelligence services have certainly identified most of them, but lack the resources to take action. His expression grew wary. What are you proposing? A race. You take half the locations, we'll take the other half. Let's see who can better protect the innocent civilians in this region. The challenge was so audacious that it left both diplomats speechless. Never in galactic history had anyone suggested competing with the established order to see who could better serve the common good. Finally, Aura found her voice. This is highly irregular. Council forces cannot simply launch unauthorized military operations based on a dare. Then don't, replied simply. Continue your established procedures. File the proper reports, convene the appropriate committees, debate the legal implications for the next 6 months while people die. And you? Asked through clenched teeth. Admiral's smile was sharp enough to cut vacuum. We'll be busy making the galaxy a little bit safer for people like Captain. The human fleet began moving even as she spoke, ships peeling away from the formation with the precision of a military drill. Their departure vectors corresponded exactly to the pirate base locations had transmitted. Admiral called, his voice rising with urgent authority. You cannot simply. But the transmission cut off as the human ships engaged their faster-than-light drives. One by one, they vanished into hyperspace with the kind of casual efficiency that spoke of technology generations ahead of anything the Council possessed. Only Admiral's flagship remained, maintaining position near the damaged mining vessel. Her image on the showed absolute calm in the face of what was essentially a declaration of war against the established galactic order. First speaker Aura, Admiral, she said formally. It has been educational meeting you both. I suspect we'll have more opportunities to discuss our philosophical differences in the near future. Admiral, Aura began urgently. Surely we can negotiate. There's nothing to negotiate. You've had 1,000 years to build a galaxy worth living in. You've chosen to maintain a system that serves the powerful at the expense of the powerless. His expression softened slightly. But it's not too late to choose differently. The transmission ended, leaving the Council ships alone with their confusion and Captain alone with the growing realization that his universe had just changed forever. The galactic communication networks buzzed with activity as news of the human intervention spread across civilized space. In the 3 days following the confrontation at the asteroid field, every major news service, diplomatic channel, and military command center was trying to process what had happened. Captain stood in the observation lounge of Admiral's flagship, the TDF Indomitable, watching the stars wheel past as the massive vessel traveled between star systems. The humans had insisted on providing escort for the precious Echo during its journey home, but suspected their real purpose was to give him a first-hand look at their operations. The repairs to your ship are complete, Commander informed him as she entered the lounge. Your crew is ready to depart whenever you wish. And yet we continue to travel together, observed. Moved to stand beside him at the vast viewport. Admiral thought you might want to see what we've been doing. As if summoned by her words, the ship's intercom activated with the Admiral's voice. Captain, Commander, please report to the bridge. We're approaching the Taller system. The bridge of the human warship was a marvel of organized efficiency. Crew members worked at stations that seemed to anticipate their needs, while holographic displays showed tactical information with a clarity that surpassed anything in the Galactic Council's arsenal. Admiral stood at the center of it all, radiating the kind of calm authority that came from absolute confidence in her ship and crew. "Captain," she greeted with a nod, "I wanted you to observe our next operation. It should be educational." The main displayed the Taller system, showing 2 inhabited worlds and the usual commercial traffic moving between them. But the tactical overlay revealed something else entirely, a massive asteroid field that had been converted into a fortified base. "Pirate stronghold," explained Commander Torres from the tactical station. "The Crimson Fleet. They've been operating from this location for 8 years, raiding civilian shipping throughout the region." "The Council knows about this?" asked. "Oh yes," Admiral replied. "They've filed reports, issued warnings to commercial traffic, even sent a diplomatic mission asking the pirates to consider relocating to uninhabited space." The absurdity of the statement wasn't lost on. They asked the pirates, politely, to stop being pirates. "Diplomatic solutions are always preferable to military action," said, though her tone suggested her own opinion of such policies. "The Council's position is that they lack the resources for offensive operations against well-fortified positions." On the tactical display, the asteroid base was indeed impressive. Weapon platforms nestled in the rocky debris, while shield generators created protective barriers around the installation. Docked at improvised harbors were dozens of ships, many clearly modified civilian vessels turned to predatory purposes. "How do you plan to approach this?" asked, genuinely curious. The base looked impregnable, protected by natural barriers and heavy fortifications. Admiral smiled, directly. The Indomitable dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the asteroid field, making no attempt at stealth or subterfuge. Immediately, warning signals began broadcasting from the pirate base. "Unknown vessel, you are entering restricted space. Alter course immediately or face defensive action." Admiral activated the ship's communication system. "This is Admiral Sarah of the Terran Defense Force. You have 30 seconds to release any civilian captives and surrender for processing." The response was predictable. "Terran, never heard of you, Admiral, but you're about to learn why the Crimson Fleet owns this system." The asteroid base opened fire with everything it had. Energy beams and missile volleys filled the space between the base and the human warship, creating a light show visible from planets away. None of it mattered. The Indomitable's defensive systems handled the incoming fire with casual efficiency. Point defense lasers intercepted missiles while energy shields deflected beam weapons. The massive ship didn't even slow its approach. "Fascinating," murmured, watching the display. "Your defensive technology is remarkable." "Defense is important," acknowledged, "but sometimes you need to send a clearer message." She nodded to her tactical officer. "Lieutenant Park, please demonstrate our position on piracy." The human warship's main guns fired once. The asteroid that contained the primary command center simply ceased to exist, vaporized by weapons that seemed to harness the power of stars themselves. The remaining pirates didn't surrender immediately. Instead, they launched their ships in a desperate attempt to scatter and escape. It was exactly what Admiral had been waiting for. "All ships execute containment protocol," she ordered calmly. Space around the asteroid field shimmered as more human vessels. They had been waiting in perfect concealment, positioned to intercept any escape attempt. The pirate ships found themselves trapped in a sphere of overwhelming firepower. "This is your final warning," broadcast on all frequencies. "Surrender now or be destroyed." This time, the pirates chose wisdom over pride. One by one, their ships powered down weapons and transmitted surrender codes. Commander turned to, "Captain, the Crimson Fleet has been operating in this region for 8 years. In that time, they've attacked over 200 civilian vessels, killed thousands of innocents, and stolen cargo worth millions of credits. How long do you think it should take to bring them to justice?" Considered the question carefully. The council process would require investigation, evidence gathering, diplomatic negotiations. Perhaps 2 years to build a case if they decided to pursue it at all. 14 minutes, Admiral said simply. From emergence to surrender, 14 minutes to end 8 years of predation. The implications were staggering. If the humans could neutralize established pirate bases this efficiently, they could reshape the entire security situation in this region of the galaxy within months. "What happens to the prisoners?" asked. "Justice," replied. "They'll be tried for their crimes with evidence and due process. Those guilty of murder will face appropriate consequences. Those who were coerced or joined out of desperation will have opportunities for rehabilitation. And their victims will finally see their tormentors held accountable." As the human fleet organized the captured pirates for transport, Admiral's communication system activated with an incoming message. The identifier showed it as coming from Galactic Council Central Command. "Admiral," came the familiar voice of First Speaker Aura, "we need to discuss recent developments." "First Speaker," replied courteously, "I assume you're referring to our anti-piracy operations. Among other things, your actions have created significant diplomatic complications. Several Council member species are demanding explanations for your unauthorized military activities." "I see, and what explanations are being provided?" There was a pause before Aura continued. "That's complicated. Admiral, in the 72 hours since our last conversation, your forces have eliminated 14 major pirate organizations, freed over 300 civilian captives, and recovered stolen property worth approximately 50 million credits. Is that a problem?" "The problem," came a new voice as Admiral joined the conversation, "is that you've accomplished in 3 days what the Council's forces have been unable to achieve in 3 years. The admission hung in the air like an accusation against the entire galactic order. Realized he was witnessing something unprecedented, the established government being forced to confront its own inadequacy. "Perhaps," suggested gently, "the Council's methods need reassessment." "Perhaps," replied through clearly gritted teeth, "your methods are too extreme. You've essentially declared war on every pirate organization in the galaxy." "No, Admiral, we've declared war on piracy itself." Aura's crystalline voice carried a note of desperation. "Admiral, surely you understand that your actions are destabilizing the entire regional power structure. The implications for galactic governance are exactly what they should be," interrupted. "First Speaker, you're upset because we're demonstrating that the problems you've told people are unsolvable actually have very simple solutions." "Simple for a species with your technological advantages," protested. "No," corrected firmly, "simple for a species with different priorities." Captain found himself speaking before he had consciously decided to join the conversation. "Admiral, if I may, in the past 3 days, the humans have made shipping lanes safer for my people than they've been in living memory. Whatever their methods, the results speak for themselves." "Captain," Aura said carefully, "you must understand that accepting unauthorized protection from unknown entities sets dangerous precedents. More dangerous than watching our people die while waiting for authorized help that never comes." The question struck to the heart of everything that was wrong with the current galactic order. How many species lived with the constant fear of predation because the Council lacked the will or resources to provide effective protection? Admiral's voice carried a note of finality when she responded. "First Speaker, Admiral, you're welcome to file whatever diplomatic protests you feel necessary, but we will continue to protect innocent civilians from predators, regardless of whether our actions conform to your established procedures." "This cannot be allowed to continue," declared. "The Council will not tolerate." "Will not tolerate what?" interrupted, her voice turning ice cold. "Will not tolerate people being kept safe, will not tolerate pirates facing consequences for their actions, will not tolerate a galaxy where the innocent can travel without fear." The silence that followed was profound. Finally, Aura spoke, her voice heavy with what might have been resignation. "Admiral, what do you want from us?" "Nothing," replied simply. "We don't want anything from the Council. We're not seeking recognition, authority, or legitimacy from your government. We're simply doing what needs to be done." "And if the Council opposes you?" Admiral looked directly into the camera and saw something in her eyes that made him grateful these beings had chosen to be protectors rather than conquerors. "Then you'll discover why pirates have been surrendering rather than fighting." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge of the human warship in contemplative silence. Captain realized he had just witnessed a fundamental shift in galactic power dynamics. The humans weren't trying to overthrow the existing order. They were simply demonstrating that it was inadequate and offering an alternative through their actions. "Captain," Admiral said quietly, Your ship is ready for departure. You're free to go home whenever you choose. And if we encounter more pirates during our journey? Smile was warm but carried an underlying promise that would have terrified any predator within 1,000 light years. Captain, as long as humans patrol these stars, no innocent being will call for help and receive only silence. As prepared to return to his own ship, he realized that the galaxy his people had always known, where the weak lived at the mercy of the strong, was coming to an end. In its place, something new was being born, a universe where justice was more than just a word and where protection was a right rather than a privilege. The age of predators was ending. The age of guardians had begun. 6 months after the first encounter in the asteroid field, the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The human presence had expanded from a single fleet to a vast network of protection that spanned dozens of star systems. Their ships appeared wherever predators threatened the innocent, moving with impossible speed and striking with overwhelming force. Captain stood in the Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council headquarters, one of hundreds of beings gathered for an unprecedented emergency session. The massive chamber buzzed with nervous conversations in dozens of languages as representatives from across civilized space struggled to process the new reality that humanity had created. The past 6 months had seen a transformation that bordered on the miraculous. Pirate attacks had dropped to nearly zero in human-protected space. Commercial shipping lanes that had been abandoned for years were now seeing regular traffic. Species that had lived in constant fear were beginning to believe that safety was more than just a fleeting dream. But the Council leadership was struggling to maintain relevance in this new order. "The situation has become untenable," announced Chief Administrator, his 4 arms gesticulating for emphasis as he addressed the assembly. "These self-appointed guardians operate with complete disregard for established authority. They ignore our protocols, dismiss our jurisdiction, and undermine our legitimacy." A ripple of mixed reactions swept through the chamber. Some species nodded in agreement with the administrator's concerns about unauthorized military action. Others, particularly those who had benefited directly from human protection, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "With respect," interjected Ambassador of the Trade Union, "the humans have accomplished more for galactic security in 6 months than the Council managed in the previous 6 years." "That is not the point," replied sharply. "Effectiveness does not grant legitimacy. If we allow any species with superior technology to enforce their will upon others, we abandon the principles of democratic governance that—" "Democratic governance?" The voice that interrupted belonged to Captain himself, who found himself standing before he had consciously decided to speak. The entire assembly turned to look at him, and he realized with some shock that he was about to challenge the fundamental assumptions of galactic civilization. "Captain of the Consortium," he identified himself formally. "Chief Administrator, you speak of democratic governance, but my people have never voted in council elections. We pay no taxes to your government, receive no representation in your deliberations, yet you claim authority over our fate. Where is the democracy in that?" Uncomfortable murmurs spread through the assembly. His question struck at something most representatives preferred not to examine too closely: the fact that the council claimed authority over far more beings than it actually represented. "The council operates under established interstellar law," replied, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "Membership is voluntary, but our authority extends to all civilized space for the common good." "Whose definition of common good?" pressed. "When my ship was attacked, we broadcast distress calls for 18 hours without response. The common good apparently didn't include saving our lives." Admiral, representing the Council's military forces, stood to address the assembly. "Captain, while your personal experience was regrettable, you must understand that Council forces operate under severe resource constraints. We cannot be everywhere at once." "But humans can." The question came from an unexpected source: Ambassador K of the Hegemony Worlds, a species known for their military prowess and political pragmatism. "In 6 months, human forces have responded to over 300 distress calls with an average response time of under 20 minutes. They've eliminated 47 pirate organizations, freed over 2,000 captives, and restored security to shipping lanes we had written off as lost causes." K's compound eyes fixed on Admiral. "Admiral, Can you explain how a species we'd never heard of 6 months ago has proven more effective at maintaining galactic security than our established military forces? The silence that followed was damning in its implications. Finally, attempted a response. The humans possess technological advantages that... No, the single word cut through his explanation like a blade. All heads turned toward the chamber's entrance, where a new figure had appeared. Admiral Sarah walked into the assembly hall with the confident stride of someone accustomed to command. She wore what appeared to be a formal version of human military dress, dark blue with subtle insignia that somehow conveyed authority without ostentation. Behind her came two other humans, Commander and an older woman didn't recognize. Admiral Chief Administrator managed, clearly struggling to maintain his composure. This is a closed session of the Galactic Council. Non-members are not permitted. I was invited, replied calmly, producing a formal document. By Captain and 237 other beings whose ships we've protected in recent months. They petitioned for human representation in these proceedings. The administrator's face showed a mixture of outrage and legal confusion. That's unprecedented. Non-member species cannot simply demand. Can't they? The older woman beside Admiral stepped forward. I'm Dr. Elizabeth, Professor of Interstellar Law at the Human Colonial University. I've spent considerable time studying council legal precedents. She smiled with the kind of professional courtesy that made lawyers nervous. According to Article 7 of the Council Charter, any species that provides significant material benefit to galactic civilization may petition for emergency representation status. Significant material benefit, sputtered. They're an unknown species that appeared 6 months ago. An unknown species, Doctor continued smoothly, that has saved approximately 8,000 lives, recovered property worth over 300 million credits, and restored commercial viability to 17 shipping routes. She produced another document. I believe the legal term is compelling public interest. The assembly erupted in chaos as representatives tried to process this unexpected development. Species that had benefited from human protection were calling out their support, while council loyalists protested the precedent being set. Admiral waited for the noise to die down before speaking. Honored representatives, I didn't come here to debate legal technicalities or challenge anyone's authority. I came to offer you a choice. What kind of choice? Asked first speaker Aura, her crystalline voice cutting through the remaining chatter. Gestured toward the massive display screen that dominated the chamber. May I? Without waiting for permission, Commander activated a holographic projection that filled the space above the assembly. It showed a three-dimensional map of local space, with different colored indicators marking various types of activity. This is the current security situation in our region of the galaxy, explained. Red markers indicate active pirate bases. Yellow markers show shipping lanes under threat. Green markers represent secure zones under effective protection. The display was sobering. Vast areas of space showed red or yellow indicators, representing regions where predators operated with impunity. But flowing through these danger zones like rivers of safety were corridors of green, marking shipping lanes that humans had made secure. 6 months ago, continued, this entire region was essentially red and yellow. Peaceful species traveled in fear if they traveled at all. Pirates operated openly, and legitimate commerce was strangled by constant predation. She gestured, and the display shifted to show the progression of changes over time. The green zones spread like growing plants, connecting previously isolated worlds and opening trade routes that had been abandoned for years. We've proven that effective security is possible, said. The question now is, what kind of galaxy do we want to build? Ambassador K leaned forward in his seat. Admiral, what exactly are you proposing? Partnership, replied simply. Not submission to human authority, but cooperation between all species who believe that the innocent deserve protection and predators should face consequences. And what would this partnership look like? Asked Dara. Nodded to Commander, who activated another display. This one showed organizational charts and operational protocols that made several representatives gasp in surprise. We're proposing the formation of an active defense coalition, explained. Species would contribute according to their capabilities. Some provide ships, others offer technology, logistics support, or intelligence. But the core principle would be simple. When innocents call for help, help comes. Under whose command? Demanded Admiral, who would have authority over this coalition. No one, replied, and everyone. Each species maintains full sovereignty over its own forces, but when civilians need protection, we respond together according to established protocols. The concept was so radically different from traditional galactic governance that many representatives struggled to process it. Instead of centralized authority imposing its will from above, this was voluntary cooperation organized around shared principles. What about species that choose not to participate? Asked Chief Administrator. Would they be excluded from protection? Admiral's expression softened slightly. Administrator, when a child is drowning, you don't ask about their parents' political affiliations before jumping in the water. Protection isn't a reward for political compliance. It's a moral imperative. But surely there must be some framework for accountability, pressed. Some mechanism to prevent abuse of power. There is, replied. Results, every action we take is public record. Every life saved, every predator stopped, every trade route secured. The galaxy can judge for itself whether we're serving the common good. Captain found himself speaking again. 6 months ago, my crew and I were prepared to die in an asteroid field, abandoned by those who claimed authority over our fate. Today, I travel freely through space that was once too dangerous to enter. He looked around the assembly. That's not politics or law or diplomacy. That's the difference between a galaxy where the innocent live in fear and one where they live in hope. The chamber fell silent as the implications of his words sank in. This wasn't really a debate about human authority or council jurisdiction. It was about two fundamentally different visions of what galactic civilization could become. The humans are offering us a choice, continued. We can continue accepting that predation is natural and protection is impossible, or we can build something better. First speaker Ara spoke carefully. Admiral, if the Council were to modify its approach to security operations, would humanity be willing to work within existing frameworks? Considered the question seriously. First speaker, we're willing to work with anyone who shares our commitment to protecting the innocent, but we won't compromise on that commitment for the sake of political convenience, even if it means operating outside established authority. Especially then. The finality in his voice made the choice clear. Humanity wasn't seeking permission to protect the innocent. They were already doing it. The only question was whether other species would join them or continue trying to maintain a status that had failed so many. Ambassador K stood slowly. Admiral, the hegemony worlds formally request to join your defense coalition. As do the trade unions, added Ambassador. One by one, representatives began standing and declaring their support. Not all. Many species remained loyal to the Council or uncertain about this new path, but enough stood to represent a significant portion of the galaxy's peaceful civilizations. Admiral nodded respectfully to each declaration. To all species choosing to join this coalition, welcome. To those choosing to remain with existing frameworks, we respect your decision and hope we can still cooperate when circumstances require it. She looked directly at Chief Administrator. Administrator, the Council is welcome to join our efforts whenever you're ready to put the protection of innocents ahead of political considerations. As the assembly began to break apart into smaller discussions, Captain realized he had witnessed the birth of something unprecedented. A galactic civilization organized around justice rather than power, protection rather than authority. The old galaxy, where predators ruled through fear and the weak survived only by hiding, was ending. In its place, a new order was emerging, one where strength served justice and the innocent could look to the stars with hope instead of fear. Admiral approached him as representatives filed out of the chamber. Captain, thank you for speaking today. Your voice carried weight because you've lived the reality we're trying to change. Admiral replied, my people have a saying, the darkness cannot be overcome by those who refuse to light candles. You've lit a fire that will illuminate the entire galaxy. As they stood in the grand chamber where the fate of trillions had been decided, looked through the vast windows at the stars beyond. Somewhere among those distant points of light, human ships maintained their eternal vigil, ensuring that no call for help would go unanswered. The age of predators was over, the age of guardians had begun. And the galaxy would never be the same.